Hi, thank you guys for joining me for this Reggie for Cincinnati Social Work Month Zoom call. I actually think it's really funny that we're having this call because this is the technology that we're using at the moment. But all of you guys have graciously agreed to knock doors with us on this beautiful Sunday. So I'm going to see you all like in an hour, and we're going to be outside knocking doors. But you are so generous in giving me lots of your time on this beautiful day. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I'm also excited because as a social worker, for me, it's really important to, in this campaign, to lead with my social work values, to lead with the experience that I have gained working as a social worker, and also to be able to staff the campaign with social workers. And so, from super volunteers like Marcel to our social work intern, Melody, to our senior policy advisor, Ryan, it's just critically important to me for this campaign to have and be really influenced and shaped by social workers. So what I want to talk about is social work and politics, right? So I'm running for Cincinnati City Council, and it's Social Work Month, and I know that the social work profession has had a long history of social workers who were in elected office, right? So I think immediately about Representative Barbara Lee of California, right, who was made history as being the only member of Congress that didn't vote to approve the Defensive Authorization Act, essentially the act that allowed for the Patriot Act. And she was the only person in Congress, and she made this super compelling speech about her values as a social worker. And it turns out she was right. And so I think that's an incredible example of social workers. I think about Ambassador Wendy Sherman, who is now what did Biden appoint her? Oh, I should know this. I'm going to Google this before we end this. But Wendy Sherman, prior to being appointed to President Biden's cabinet, was under President Obama the chief negotiator for the Iran deal. So again, having social workers that have worked their way through the ranks, and she very much talks about her social work background and social work values in guiding her through that process. And so then, like, at the state and local levels, there are lots of social workers in public office, but I don't think that it's commonly understood how involved social workers are in politics and have been in politics. So I think we're hoping to change that. So I actually want to switch it up. I'm going to throw it to you all first, since I've just talked a lot during this intro, but and maybe we'll start with Ryan. To introduce yourself, Ryan, and then share with us the moment that you sort of recognize or realize the sort of intersection between social work and politics.
Sure. So my name is Ryan Hall. I'm a licensed independent social worker in Ohio. I work in the field of youth homelessness. So I'm a little bit more on the administrative side, managing a pretty large grant that Cincinnati received about 3 years ago to address youth homelessness in Cincinnati. And then on the side, because all social workers have side hustles, I also provide therapy out of a private practice in Kentucky. So the moment that I realized the intersections of politics and social work, I don't think there was one kind of crystallized moment for me. I feel like politics is actually what got me into social work. When I think about kind of what got me into social work, it's a couple of different paths. But one of those was growing up listening to hardcore punk, which provided some really excellent critiques at not only politics, but like our social fabric. And then when I found social work, it seemed that was a solution to a lot of the critiques that were thrown out. And so as I worked specifically with youth experiencing homelessness who are living on the street as a youth outreach worker, I saw the intersection of lots of different failed public policy at work, especially especially in the years of like 2013 to 2015, which were really kind of like the high watermark of the opiate addiction here in Hamilton County. The absolutely failed policies of the war on drugs led to the exacerbation and the ruining of so many lives of my clients, ranging from clients who had, been picked up as minors or as young adults with just a minimal amount of marijuana on them, a drug that is very quickly being legalized in a lot of states, getting thrown into the never-ending churn of the juvenile and the new juvenile justice system and the Hamilton County justice system, of never-ending court fees, never-ending court appearances, and lots of legal barriers to obtaining housing. And then on the other end of that, during the opioid epidemic, so many of the clients that I was working with who were on the streets would just disappear. We would be making progress towards getting them housing, towards getting them treatment, towards making some major improvements in their life. And then all of a sudden they would just disappear, right? And I would have to go find them in the justice center. And once they would get out at like 2, 3 in the morning, it would start right back up. And all of that progress that we made, we'd have to quickly try to regain. But it was a cat and mouse game between how often they would get picked up by the police for what was clearly an addiction that had its roots in, not only the failed policies of the war on drugs, but also the massive deregulation of, our pharmaceutical companies. So like seeing the I feel like so many of the issues we deal with are the failings at the political level, right? The not only the passing of bad policy, but the deregulation of good policy. And so we as social workers see that on a very human and like a very like acute level. So yeah, not one. For me, it wasn't one thing. It was lots of different interlocking policies that I saw failing.
Right. And you said something that I thought was really interesting because I think that we have lots of conversations about this phenomenon, like when we're thinking about the campaign work, is that, so we have you have federal policies, right, that impact states and cities, and state policy that impact cities. And so thinking about what does it mean to be a progressive city when there are these bumper cars, these bumper, lanes of laws that don't allow cities to maybe take very sort of like proactive stances, and that game of that work. So I think it just reminded me of like some of the work that we're doing. So I want to shift over to Melody because I want you to share like how you came, your background, how you came to work on this campaign, and for you, kind of your journey of understanding the interplay between social work and politics.
Yeah, definitely. So I am a licensed social worker in the state of Ohio, and I'm working on my graduate degree through the University of Kentucky for a master's of social work. And so for me, that moment of piecing together that intersectionality of politics and the work that I want to do in social work was very, very recent. Just back in, I want to say July or August, I was, having dinner with a friend who is in law school. And we would have amazing conversations. He was a great debater. He's going to be an amazing lawyer. And so we would just constantly tackle all kinds of, social and political issues. And one day we were talking about, criminals and criminals being in prison and why punishment is necessary and all these different things, and why people break laws and kind of like the human behavior behind that. And I just kind of had this moment where I was so passionate in what I was saying, and it kind of came up like word vomit of the people that are making these laws, a lot of them have never been in the position where they need to break a law to do something for themselves or their families. And so it's kind of like that, that ethical dilemma of, can you steal food to provide for your family? And I don't know, I just kind of felt like very strong about that many times legislators or policymakers aren't the ones who have been, impoverished or have faced a lot of disadvantage. And so I just wanted to get into something where I could see how that process is created and what that looks like. And so I wanted to go more macro. I've always been a lot more of that micro individual level, or even doing groups, that meso. And so when I started grad school, it was really important to me to find some type of policy advocacy work or anything that would deal with legislation, lawmakers. And so when I reached out to the National Association of Social Workers for a little bit of guidance, they were super amazing and directed me to this campaign and said that it would be a wonderful opportunity for me to see, how the local level works, and have a chance to participate in a campaign and really see what it's like as someone who's running as a social worker, to always have those social work values and those ethical principles, and to use those in your campaign, and to like put your policy platform off of those values, and giving voice to those people who aren't commonly heard. And so that's how I've gotten here.
And we're super glad to have you. And I also want to say, for the record, I'm also a licensed independent clinical social worker as well. I think that's important. But, that we are celebrating that the campaign received the endorsement of our campaign from the National Association of Social Workers in the Ohio chapter. So we are truly grateful. And Ryan and Melody were really instrumental in helping craft our policies to be able to share for our endorsement answers. And so thank you again. Cool. All right, Marcel. So, Marcel is one of my besties. I love him dearly. And he is a pretty great person. I call him a super volunteer, because he's someone that I just call immediately, like, I need you here now, show up. And 9.5 times out of 10, he does. So
I can't wait to canvas today.
Anyway,
nice
say it again.
It's so nice outside. It's perfect to canvas.
It's gorgeous, yeah. But I want to throw it over to you and tell us about your background, your work, the work that you do. I find it to be super interesting. And for you, that evolution of understanding the intersection of social work and politics.
Yeah, I think I've been pretty closely related to policy and social work in that connection from the beginning. I'm a new social worker. I graduated school in 2017. And since then, I've been working actually under a piece of legislation that helps social workers meet a need for people living with HIV. And so I don't know if people are familiar with the Ryan White program, but it's a piece of legislation enacted by Congress in 1990 to sort of help lower cost of medications, doctor bills, support people with housing, living with HIV. And over more than half of people living with HIV in the United States use this program. And that is sort of a breathing, living, always changing piece of legislation that changes a lot because of the social workers who work within that program. And so I happen to be one of those social workers. And so I feel like I've always sort of known this sort of very close link between policy and social work. And sometimes I think the most helpful piece of knowing that Reggie is running for city council is because there are so many times where I wish there was a social worker in the room when I'm trying to help a client meet a need, and we're wondering why it's so difficult. And I think social workers really help give perspective and make sure that policies reflect the actual lived experience and the actual need. And that's why I'm so excited to help you on your campaign, because obviously your social work background really keeps you grounded in that experience.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Really?
It's interesting to me, like when I hear, I think that my evolution in this journey is probably closer to Melody's. I think that for, when I'm with Ryan and Marcel, I think that you guys, it was like very clear to you at the beginning, and maybe even your own beliefs drew you to social work to be able to impact that. And I didn't have that clarity starting out at all. I was very much just like Melody. I was like, oh, like, being able to provide mental health care. Like, yes, that's going to help people. That, you know, this is what you do. And I think that like it probably also mirrors my like political evolution. And so I think that even though I grew up in a Black family and in an all Black neighborhood, you know, we are, you know, I'm a third generation Democrat. I think in some ways my family still was kind of conservative in that I think that we really, I was raised to believe very strongly in the American dream and meritocracy and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. And I was really conditioned to, you know, work towards a sort of an assimilation and, you know, just doing all of the things. And that quickly got beat out of me. I was a professional dancer prior to this and working in all, you know, white environments. I was like, oh, okay. Meritocracy, that's interesting. Not so much the case. And so I have had this, as I have grown, I have been sort of like disabused of some of these beliefs. But I came into social work thinking that like, after working in a public performing arts high school and seeing kids struggling and wanting to understand why they were struggling, even though it was a well-resourced school. And I recognized that like, oh, we were a well-resourced school, but we were uh, not a trauma-informed school, and we were not responsive to kids' needs in a way that was helpful and beneficial, right? So I was like, oh, okay, great. So if you like change the way, you know, organizations interact with kids, things are gonna get better. And so I'm like, I went head full with this, like, yes, trauma informed. I'm gonna train everyone. I'm gonna do this. This is gonna be great. And then you're like, oh, well, you know, trauma is caused not only by like single incidents of sort of interpersonal violence, but by experiencing homelessness, food insecurity, community violence. Oh, that's just not a, you know, a personal experience. And so as I did the work, it just became clearer and clearer to me that, you know, I use this metaphor of the stream of going upstream to sort of save people from falling in, and create, and not even saving, right? Because, you know, in social work, we don't save people, but we, you know, we think about how do we help support and shape environments so that everyone has access. And so that's like, you know, going further up the river. Um, and so, yeah, well, listen, I really appreciate your time. You know, I can't say that enough. I want to end with, and then we'll go in reverse order. We'll start with Marcel. Are there a couple words you would share to aspiring social workers? Like why social work? Why pick this profession? What is great about this profession from your experience? So, Marcel, what do you think?
Um, I think the best thing about this experience is there's no shortage of work. Um, and it really is a profession that is like human centered. You know, a computer can't do this job. You know, a computer can't really do the work in the way social workers do it. And I'm really lucky, I feel, to be a social worker doing this work, but also being a part of these bigger change moments like this campaign, like other things happening in our city that really sort of those moments where you feel like, oh, okay, this is why I'm doing it. And so, yeah, I would encourage any social worker to just hold on to those moments that really make you believe and affirm why you started in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those moments.
Awesome. Melody, how about you?
Yeah, coming off of what Marcel said, that this is, you know, this cannot be done through a computer, what we do, just all of the human-centered approaches that we have and the connections and the relationships that we're able to build. I have felt so extremely grateful and lucky for any person that I have been able to meet within my practice, within my work, you know, from my graduate field placement to my current position and in this campaign. It's just it's an ongoing evolution of myself, of the people that I get to, you know, learn from, different cultures, different dynamics that I get to experience, and just being able to be exposed to that is something that I'm so happy for in this work. And yeah, I would say the overall connection that I get to make is definitely what I love about it.
Awesome. How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I guess I would say that I think the most important thing that we do as social workers is we empower individuals and make resources available to communities, and then get out of the way, and let people make decisions based on their own values. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I think that's in a lot of ways. Loosening the levers of power a little bit, to just give people room to live their lives and do what they want to do, unencumbered by a very oppressive system. So, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, I agree, Ryan, and I often think about, I mean, for me, so what I feel very fortunate about with in terms of my social work career and the education is just the framework of thought that it has provided, right? I work, in my work, I work with a lot of um, urban planners and community planners, and I work with a lot of lawyers. I work with a lot of people who have MBAs, and so I can just see this like very clear um, thought process that these various professions have, and recognize that as a social worker, I equally have as strong of a thought process, right? And it really is it's human centered. It's about interpersonal communications, and I'm often in situations where my colleagues want to solve a problem through process, and I'm like, the communication's off though. So I don't care how good the process is. Like, there's not a lot of trust, and and so recognizing that every time I'm going into a situation, my strength, and it's from my training, is I'm seeing, the strength in processes or the breakdown in processes because of the lack of attention, or maybe the natural, charisma of the interpersonal communication. So I just feel that I've been able to really name that and harness that, and also sell that as a skill set, as a very valuable skill set for problem solving. And that is very different from organizational leadership or, change management or whatever, right? It really is about people's motivations, human behaviors, right? How people's backgrounds influence, identities, demographics shape the way they show up and do their job. And that's social work. And that impacts everything. So I'm super lucky. Well, listen, let's have some time before we go out and canvas. But thank you so much for your time. And I am super excited to mark this March social work with the ability to work so closely with awesome social workers.